Crime Night starts in an hour on Bio with appalling behaviour from lawyers and defendants alike. Disorder in the Court follows Prince Charles, Born to be King, which contains some flash photography.
In 1969, the year of his 21st birthday, the eyes of the world were on Prince Charles. He was about to be crowned Prince of Wales, the title bestowed on male heirs to the throne by his mother, the Queen.
I, Charles, Prince of Wales, do become your liege man of life and limb.
This is the story of Charles, Prince of Wales, a man born to be king. He's still a king in waiting, with a new wife and a new life. But to begin at the beginning, on November the 14th, 1948.
It has just been announced from Buckingham Palace that Her Royal Highness, the Princess Elizabeth, Duchess of Edinburgh, was safely delivered of a prince at 9:14 p.m., and that Her Royal Highness and her son are both doing well.
There was great excitement that day all over Britain, and especially outside Buckingham Palace, where crowds had gathered the night before and had swelled as the news broke next morning. A radiant Princess Elizabeth introduced Charles, Philip, Arthur, George. The new prince was welcomed into the world by his proud father, Prince Philip, his grandfather, King George VI, and his grandmother, the Queen. Elizabeth and her husband paraded their young son in the garden of their country home. These pictures of a new prince of the realm would raise morale in almost every home in Britain, and no royal shone more brightly than Princess Elizabeth and Prince Philip. Married just 18 months, they were the nation's perfect couple. Their glamour, if anything, enhanced now that they'd produced an heir. The Britain Prince Charles had been born into still bore the scars of the Second World War. Food and clothing were still rationed. The National Health Service that brought free medical treatment was a blessing. But for many, the dream factory called the cinema offered the only real escape. In 1950, Charles was joined by a sister, Princess Anne, and they boarded the train for Scotland to visit their grandfather, King George VI. The king had not been well enough to see the new baby and had been convalescing at Balmoral, the Scottish home of the royal family. When they arrived, a little bored by all the attention his new baby sister was attracting, Charles set off to explore Scotland on his own, but found it a wee bit daunting and beat a hasty retreat. Soon, the royal party would be back in London, waiting for the photographers on the day of Princess Anne's christening. Prince Charles was late arriving, but quickly maneuvered himself into the welcome lap of his grandmother, the Queen. They would form a close bond, and he would become her favorite grandson. Much of the time, it was his granny, not his nanny, who babysat for Charles whilst his parents were abroad. This time they were returning from a 3-month visit to Canada, and Charles seemed a little bewildered when those vaguely familiar adults approached him. But when his parents set off on their next tour, Charles's life would change forever. Princess Elizabeth and Prince Philip were in Kenya early in 1952 on the first stage of a Commonwealth tour, deputizing for the ailing king. But terrible news would bring them home.
It was announced from Sandringham at 10:45 today, February the 6th, 1952, that the king passed peacefully away in his sleep earlier this morning.
Prime Minister Churchill greeted the 25-year-old woman who had returned home as Queen Elizabeth II. Sadly, young Charles would never know his grandfather, who had died prematurely, aged 56.
The great ordeal begins. The imperial crown, with its 3,000 jewels, glints in the fitful light as George VI returns to his sorrowing capital. And with it, on the oak coffin, is the white wreath of his widow.
There was an unforgettable moment as three figures in mourning veils, the king's widow, his elder daughter, the new queen, and Princess Margaret, the queen's sister, said their farewells. Now that his mother was queen, Charles had automatically become Duke of Cornwall, under a charter that gave this title to the sovereign's firstborn son. It also meant that he would inherit a royal income from the vast agricultural estate, the Duchy of Cornwall. On June the 2nd, 1953, 4-year-old Charles would be at the centre of his mother's glorious day, when she would drive through London streets to Westminster Abbey. And he would have a bird's-eye view as that famous old crown was placed on her head. And all this time, his grandmother told him what was going on. When the Queen emerged on the balcony at Buckingham Palace, Charles and his sister Anne stood proudly alongside their mother, gazing down on a sea of upturned faces. So this is what it meant when you're born to be king. Every year, the family took their summer break at Balmoral, one of Charles's favourite places. He could see his parents every day here, and this day was special. His mother was running a charity stall for the locals, while he and Anne scrambled for any loose change. The spreading acres of Balmoral gave their parents a chance to play with their children, although Prince Philip didn't look as though he spent that much time in the playground. In another corner of the estate, Charles and Anne would watch the calves and the bulls. Moments like these would influence Charles's view of the natural world and inspire a love for the living environment. So far, Charles had been tutored at home, but his parents, in a break with tradition, decided to send him to a school called Hill House, just 5 minutes from Buckingham Palace. His father was there for sports day, when Charles's cricketing skills did not impress. But later, in the commando-style exercises, he showed real agility. In September 1957, Prince Philip, driving an elegant Lagonda sports car, delivered Charles 2 months before his 9th birthday to his first boarding school, Cheam, in Hampshire. It was Philip who drew the attention at first. He'd been a pupil here in the early 1930s and knew some of the teachers. But it was Charles who was the talking point, the first future king to be educated in a prep school, a boy among other boys. It was at Cheam, whilst watching the 1958 British Empire Games on the school's television set, that a voice Charles knew well rang out in the stadium.
I intend to create my son Charles, Prince of Wales, today. When he is grown up, I I will present him to you at Carnarvon.
The announcement that he was now the Prince of Wales came as a complete surprise.
Oh, why don't they understand?
It was clear that Britain was changing too. There was an affluent new pop culture. Rock and roll had arrived. Back in the quiet, unmodern retreat of Balmoral, Charles would welcome a new member of the family. His mother, after a 10-year gap, produced another son, alarming one of the royal corgis, but delighting everyone else. The new baby, Prince Andrew, was tenderly watched over by his brother, without a hint of sibling jealousy. After 5 years at Cheam, Charles would travel to his next school in sensational style. His father, an accomplished pilot, was flying him to the far north of Scotland. Gordonston was another of Prince Philip's old schools. Charles smiled bravely, but this shy prince was dreading the Spartan conditions and daunting physical challenges that Gordonston insisted on. Years later, he would remember it as Colditz in kilts, but the discipline it taught has remained with him. Charles would have a break from Gordonston when his father sent him halfway around the world to Australia. For 2 terms, he'd be a student at Timbertop, a bush country school with a fine reputation. Ill at ease at first in a different kind of English-speaking world, he soon warmed to its rough-and-tumble culture. His new Australian mates treated him as one of them. He'd be even happier when he arrived at Cambridge University in 1967 in his trendy new Mini. Charles had hoped to be received as one of the lads, but there was no chance of that. He would study archaeology and anthropology, and had asked to see the college's famous stained glass window emblazoned by the coats of arms of his own royal ancestors. Beyond the college gates, the baby boom generation, with no memory of war and hardship, had turned much of the United Kingdom into an exotic pleasure zone. But the love-in days would end abruptly. In 1968, peace-loving hippies had been shoved aside by action-loving radicals, whose protests against all war and all forms of capitalism were becoming a disturbing feature of metropolitan life. This was a long way from the gentle satire that Charles was offering in a Cambridge review.
There is a manic depression over Ireland with associated troughs of hey presto. An obsession under Sweden may develop or be relieved by a warm front. Behind that will come a cold back.
And this was the Clown Prince's royal showstopper, presenting the future king in a life and death struggle with a set of bagpipes. In early 1969, Charles left Cambridge for a term to study at the University of Wales in Aberystwyth. There was a double purpose in this move: to prepare for his formal investiture as Prince of Wales, and to damp down the fires of Welsh nationalism, which were burning again after a long sleep. And on a personal level, the Prince was determined to get to know Wales and its people, and to master its notoriously difficult language.
Aran fy nghatrawd, fe hoffwn ddiolch o galon.
Welsh-speaking scholars praised the Prince's first public speech in their ancient tongue. It won Welsh hearts and deterred a violent minority from ruining the great spectacle of the Prince's investiture, to be held in historic Carnarvon Castle, as promised by the Queen 10 years earlier. Lord Snowdon, Princess Margaret's husband, designed the set. The last Prince of Wales to be invested here, back in 1911, had been the man who would become Edward VIII, the love-obsessed king who abandoned the throne in 1936. Edward's investiture would be the model used for Charles's ceremony. It was a tradition that the prince was happy to embrace.
I feel that it is a very impressive ceremony. I know perhaps some people would think that it is rather anachronistic and out of place in this world, which is somewhat cynical. But I think it can mean quite a lot if one goes about it in the right way. I think it can have some form of symbolism. For me, it's a way of officially dedicating one's life, or part of one's life, to Wales. And the Welsh people, after all, wanted it.
Charles was the 21st in that long line of princes of Wales, dating back to medieval times. Yet even in an age obsessed with the modern, the words of an ancient pledge of allegiance, humbly spoken, would touch the hearts of millions watching this broadcast around the world.
I, Charles, Prince of Wales, do become your liege man of life and limb, and of earthly worship. And faith and truth I will bear unto thee, to live and die against all manner of folks.
In complete contrast, just 3 days later, Britain's youth focused on their own headline event, the Rolling Stones playing to a lively crowd in Hyde Park, London.
Not everybody understands the youngsters who like this kind of music, but then it wouldn't do if everyone had the same tastes, would it?
All right, it's all right with me.
In February 1970, though still a student, the new Prince of Wales was formally introduced into the House of Lords. Charles finally graduated from Cambridge that summer, the first heir to the throne to secure a degree. He had been taking flying lessons during his time at Cambridge, and now, in March 1971, he was about to fly to the RAF base in Cranwell. There, he would kick off his military career with a 5-month attachment, training to fly jets. He would also make his first parachute jump. The prince would later describe the experience as a mixture of terror and joy.
I didn't have any twists in the ringing lines, which is the other slight problem. But like all these things, they train you to take the appropriate action. It's quite exciting. It's always a sense of achievement.
Charles earned his wings as a proud father looked on. He had already won his spurs at polo, a game he loved and excelled at. It was around this time that he first met a 22-year-old Camilla Shand. The attraction was immediate and mutual. However, just as the relationship was gaining momentum, Charles, following royal family tradition, entered the Naval College at Dartmouth for a 5-year career as a naval officer. In December 1972, too young to consider marriage, a lovesick Charles sailed for the Caribbean on an 8-month tour of duty. The 1970s in Britain were increasingly blighted by social and industrial unrest. The IRA was set on a campaign of terror, and popular culture had acquired a rebellious edge. It was the celebrations for the Queen's Silver Jubilee in the summer of 1977 that would restore pride in the nation. The royal family would parade on that familiar balcony. Among them was Lord Louis Mountbatten, cousin to both the Queen and Prince Philip, who'd taken the sensitive young Charles under his wing. Lord Louis would become honorary grandfather to the young prince, and Charles felt he could confide in his great-uncle about anything. But in August 1979, Lord Louis's pleasure launch, cruising peacefully in an Irish bay, was blown out of the water by an IRA bomb and reduced to pathetic fragments. Lord Louis Mountbatten was killed instantly. The shockwaves were still receding as the Royal Navy marched in Mountbatten's honour, with his favourite horse leading the cortege, his boots reversed in the stirrups.
They that go down to the sea in ships and occupy their business in great waters, these men see the works of the Lord and his wonders in the deep.
Charles was devastated. His great-uncle had been both a hero and an inspiration to him. Uncle Louis might well have reminded Charles that he had an important duty to both his family and his country, to find a suitable wife and produce an heir. Charles was reminded of a 19-year-old aristocrat, Lady Diana Spencer, whom he'd met during a brief relationship with her sister. And Diana, in promiscuous modern Britain, was that rare thing, a complete innocent.
We thought it was going to be announced on his 32nd birthday, but there wasn't. Have you any comment to make about that?
Really done.
No comment all round.
It's work there, okay?
In February 1981, an engagement was announced. It had been a short courtship with little time to really get to know one another. Charles was only vaguely aware of Diana's unhappy childhood. Her parents had divorced when she was 8. She'd felt abandoned and, above all else, needed love. Diana looked adoringly at her fiancé as he recalled how he'd proposed to her.
Well, I asked Diana before she went to Australia, 2 or 3 days before, because I thought it'd be a good idea that, apart from anything else, if she went to Australia, she could then think about it, and if she didn't like the idea, she could say she didn't, or if she did, she could say that. But in fact, you actually said...
Yes, quite promptly.
And I suppose in love.
Of course.
Whatever in love means.
Yes.
Well, it
you can put your own
means,
interpretation.
obviously means two very happy people.
Yes,
As you can see.
Well, from us, congratulations.
Thank you very much. Very kind.
It should have been a happy day. Charles playing polo in front of an admiring crowd. But suddenly, his young fiancée burst into tears and had to be taken home by friends. Too much attention from the media, people said. Not long after, Diana was in tears again as she saw Charles off on a trip to Australia. Her tears were read as sadness at this separation from her true love. In fact, Diana had sensed that there was another woman in Charles's life. The consequences of Diana's discovery would haunt the royal family for years to come. Meanwhile, royal wedding fever was sweeping through Britain. At one school, children impersonated Charles and Diana ahead of schedule. But here, at last, was the real thing. On July the 29th, 1981, Lady Diana Spencer stepped out of her coach as transformed as any Cinderella. Her silk train, 25 feet long, stretched out behind her. She would emerge from St. Paul's Cathedral on Charles's arm as Diana, Princess of Wales. No one, apart from the bride and groom themselves, was aware of the emotional tensions brewing behind the masks of happiness. Overnight, Diana had been transformed into a public icon. Nearly 1 billion people around the world had watched the wedding. And that balcony kiss would be an inspiration to lovers everywhere. Their honeymoon would give the couple a chance to sail away from all the razzmatazz in Britain. But back on home ground in Balmoral, they had to surrender half a day to a swarm of press photographers and cope with some odd questions.
Have you cooked a breakfast yet?
For a while, they seemed a happy couple. Charles took Diana to Wales, where he demonstrated his grasp of the Welsh tongue.
Gobeddiaeth, a cywch, gefnogaeth, dailwng, o bob rhan o'r byd.
And he introduced her to his Prince's Trust, which Charles had initially set up in 1976 to help disadvantaged youth. It launched them on careers in business, sport and education, with a merry dose of entertainment thrown in, like this unicycle purchased for a children's circus, which the prince gave a rather perilous test run. Less than a year after their wedding, in June 1982, Charles and Diana produced an heir to the throne, Prince William. The public response was ecstatic.
Oh, it's wonderful, absolutely fabulous.
Oh, great. She was beautiful. Oh, it's still fantastic to talk about, really, isn't it?
Oh, I cried. I couldn't help it.
You cried?
I did, yeah.
Before long, Charles and Diana set off for Australia and landed in Sydney, where cries of approval greeted the appearance of the baby William. He was the first baby to be taken on a royal tour. It had been Diana's idea. In fact, the princess was proving a bigger draw than the prince. Asked about William's favourite toy, she sought advice from her husband.
You've got a plastic whale that throws things out the top, little balls.
The couple danced a last quick step in Australia before flying on to New Zealand. The welcome was overwhelming and in traditional Maori style, much to the couple's enjoyment. But the cameras all followed Diana. Charles was beginning to feel a little excluded. It was time to go home. In September 1984, a second son would be born. His royal name was Henry, but Charles said that his parents would call him Harry. Their children seemed to have drawn them closer. Soon the couple were off again, to Italy, with no children this time. But without them, they both looked awkward. The difference in age and cultural awareness was beginning to show.
It's the most beautiful place.
I think Florence has been particularly impressive. And, well, because a lot of English people have been there for years and years. So that was particularly interesting from my point of view. And I think the thing that stuck in my mind particularly were the Botticelli paintings that we saw in the Uffizi. That, I don't remember having seen a Botticelli for real before. And that made a great impression on me, I found.
Even the couple's public banter seemed a little forced.
You've got something to say, fellas.
Mio marito ed io siamo molto felici di essere qui. Work that out.
Salute. Now could you translate?
My husband and I are very happy to be here.
That's it.
Charles continued to pursue his other passions. Bored with the platitudes of royal speeches, he rode one of his favourite hobby horses in an attack on London's modern architecture.
Here I am. It's, after all, one of my rare opportunities to stir things up, to throw a proverbial royal brick through the inviting plate glass of pompous professional pride.
The prince had never been a city lover. He was a farmer and a philosopher at heart, and spent time alone on a Scottish island, meditating and planting organic crops. At the time, it was considered eccentric. The tabloids called him a New Age loony, but he would fight back with a weapon almost unknown to royalty: irony.
Only the other day, I was inquiring of an entire bed of old-fashioned roses who were forced to listen to my demented ramblings on the meaning of the universe as I sat cross-legged in the lotus position.
Humour had always been an escape route for Charles, and so had his passion for polo, a game that expelled all his tensions. But comfort was close at hand, for an old love was back in his life. He'd rekindled his relationship with Camilla, and this time he would not let her go. And his brother Andrew was having marriage problems of his own. Fergie, as everyone now called his wife, was breaking every royal rule.
All these men around here.
When some man shouted, "I love you," she replied,
"I'll see you later."
She had opened the door to the invaders. Tabloid journalists had caught her in an intimate moment with her American financial advisor. The new generation of royal wives was stirring the scandal pot. When a shockingly candid biography of Diana was published, one that criticized the whole royal family and accused Charles of being cold and unkind, the princess denied any involvement. Few believed her. But soon it would be Diana's turn to be humiliated, when her own secret affair with the army officer, James Hewitt, was outed by the tabloid press. There was royal exposure on every front. In fact, Diana was still fighting a war of words and images with her husband. A shot of a lonely princess gazing at that temple of love, the Taj Mahal, spoke volumes. Charles replied in kind.
Ladies and gentlemen, a wiser prince than I would have opted for a visit to the Taj Mahal and the Red Fort at Agra, which I believe is where some, at least, of the greatest pundits of the press think I ought to be anyway.
It seemed symbolic when Windsor Castle, a royal family fortress through the ages, went up in flames in November 1992. The next day, an agitated queen surveyed the damage. A whole wing of the castle had been virtually destroyed. It had been a dreadful year for the royal family, as the Queen admitted in the most candid speech of her reign.
1992 is not a year on which I shall look back with undiluted pleasure. In the words of one of my more sympathetic correspondents, it has turned out to be an annus horribilis.
By now, Charles and Diana's relationship was in tatters. Palace advisors made a last attempt to reconcile the couple by sending them on a diplomatic tour of Korea. Above all, the palace feared divorce. The prospect of Prince Charles just a step away from the throne, divorcing Diana, had sent a shudder through the royal establishment. But the palace plan collapsed when Diana's open scorn during her husband's speech dealt it a fatal blow. Prime Minister John Major rose in the House of Commons.
I wish to inform the House that Buckingham Palace are at this moment issuing the following statement. It reads as follows. It is announced from Buckingham Palace that with regret the Prince and Princess of Wales have decided to separate. Their Royal Highnesses have no plans to divorce and their constitutional positions are unaffected. This decision has been reached amicably and they will both continue to participate fully in the upbringing of their children.
In Scotland, as that dreadful year ended, Charles's sister, Princess Anne, was marrying for a second time. Princes Charles and Andrew were there without their wives. The groom was Naval Commander Timothy Lawrence and a query to the Queen. Anne's low-key wedding would be followed by a resounding tabloid splash. For a month later, Charles would seize the headlines in a deeply humiliating way. Someone had recorded one of his phone calls to Camilla, revealing intimate details of their love life. He would be haunted by the ugly mockery of the tabloids. Sadly, being stalked by the paparazzi was the one thing he still shared with his estranged wife.
I was not aware of how overwhelming that attention would become in a manner that's been hard to bear. And always your love and care has eased that journey. And for that, I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Charles needed to get away and set off on another tour of Australia. And for the first time in his life, he'd hear discordant boos among the cheers. But he'd win back all his Australian street cred when shots rang out. It turned out that the pistol shots had been blanks, and the assassin was only a student chasing notoriety. But the prince's coolness under fire would give spectacular liftoff to the rest of the tour. Back home, Diana was still disturbing the royal peace. She'd suggested that Prince William, not Charles, should be the next king. She'd confessed her adultery, and Charles had admitted there had been a third party in their marriage. Meanwhile, Camilla had split up with her husband. The royal divorce that everyone had been expecting became official in August 1996. Diana surrendered her royal title. At least divorce had cleared the air. Charles and his ex-wife put their differences aside and came together for a significant family day as 13-year-old Prince William enlisted at Britain's most famous school, Eton College. Charles and Diana had put their children first. The feuding was over. Diana was beginning a new life, winning a new following with her passionate campaign against landmines.
Having seen for myself the devastation that anti-personnel landmines cause, I am committed to supporting, in whatever way I can, the international campaign to outlaw these dreadful weapons.
Cameras followed her on a spirited march through Africa's war zones. Then, after an evening at the Ritz in Paris, she was in a car speeding towards an underpass, when suddenly it lost control and smashed into a wall with brutal force. Charles insisted that he fly to Paris to bring Diana's body home. In London, it was as though a river of grief was flowing through the city's streets. It was after midnight, and still the crowds came. The royal family, who were in Balmoral, were being criticised for not hurrying to London. The Queen and Prince Charles had wanted to give Diana a family funeral at which her traumatised sons would be protected from the morbid attention of strangers. It was a deeply emotional time. The Queen was pressed into giving her daughter-in-law a full royal funeral. Many who were there would later reflect that it was a time when the people trespassed on the royal family's private grief. Charles seemed to be a different man after Diana's death. It was as though he'd taken a vow to nurse his sons through their grief and make them happy again. From now on, he would clear his diary to spend more time with them. With William back at Eton, Charles took 13-year-old Harry with him on a whistle-stop tour of South Africa. Much to the young prince's delight, his father engineered a meeting with the touring Spice Girls. Charles would take both sons on a Canadian tour. William, in his 16th year, had become a young idol, with Harry tagging along as his big brother stole the hearts of Canadian teenagers.
He's gorgeous, he's sweet, I love him, he's everything. I'm in love with him, and all you English girls that think you're gonna get him, no way, it's me.
There was a lively moment when Charles was presented with a trendy cap. William showed Dad how to wear it, and later Charles revealed the importance of being Harry, not Henry.
He's only Henry when he does something very, very naughty indeed.
Soon after, Charles sent Prince William on a gap-year adventure in the wilds of Patagonia to experience the wider world on his own. His fellow students mischievously assigned this future king to toilet duty. Joining their father on the polo field, both Charles's boys were becoming men. Early in the new century, Charles's beloved grandmother, the Queen Mother, died at the barely credible age of 101. He'd loved her all his life. She'd been the one he'd turned to in moments of personal crisis, the one whose judgment he'd always trusted.
She saw the funny side of life, and we laughed till we cried. And oh, how I shall miss those laughs. And the wonderful wisdom born of so much experience and of an innate sensitivity to life. She was, quite simply, the most magical grandmother you could possibly have. And I was utterly devoted to her.
It was the golden summer of 2002, when the Queen celebrated 50 years on the throne. A golden jubilee like no other, watched by a worldwide audience.
The Jubilee girl is here!
With Charles thanking his mother on behalf of the nation.
And we, Your Majesty, are here tonight because, above all, we feel proud of you. Proud and grateful for everything you have done for your country and for the Commonwealth over 50 extraordinary years, supported unfailingly throughout by my father.
3 cheers for Her Majesty the Queen. Hip hip! Hip hip!
Everyone would spot Camilla in the royal box for the first time, a significant sign. Only days later, Charles was seen at church with Camilla, whose grace and tact had begun to win over an initially doubtful public. The couple were seen together often now. The emotional climate had changed.
You forgot your boots. Oh my God.
Charles's strapping young sons were real stars now, and their deep affection for their dad allowed them to tease him in public.
My cunning tricks of subtlety weren't so subtle.
Bluff and double bluff, isn't it, Billy?
Okay, but I'm well surprised you score a goal, actually.
Well, you know, I can do it even at my advanced stage of decrepitude.
Later, William would praise his father unreservedly.
He's had a difficult time, and you know, it's just sad. I said this last time. I'm sure I'll use the same words, but I just wish, you know, more of his charitable work was concentrated on, because he does do a hell of a lot of work, and the Prince's Trust is just an amazing, you know, organisation, and you know, I really hold him in great admiration about the amount of time he gives up.
There is no doubting Prince Charles's passion and commitment to his role and to his country. His charities raise more than £100 million annually. He's also built up an organic food business with its own distinctive brand, which donates all its profits to charity. Prince Charles's early vision of a healthier, organic farming world, scorned at first, has become accepted wisdom, and on the world stage, he is now an environmental hero. He's passing the message on to his son and heir. On royal duty, Charles, very much a working prince, personally carries out in excess of 600 public engagements a year.
William, Wales.
Not including family engagements like this, when Prince William graduated from St Andrews University, with Charles and Camilla applauding from the front row.
Catherine Middleton.
There was also applause for a graduate called Kate Middleton, who was William's girlfriend. There would be a blip in that relationship. The relentless stalking of Kate by paparazzi disturbed them both, and for a while they separated. But Charles gave his son wise counsel. Make no decisions till you've cleared your head and thought it through. Charles had clearly thought his own future through. A spring wedding in Windsor. On April the 9th, 2005, Prince Charles finally married the woman he'd fallen in love with more than 30 years ago. The couple seemed enchanted.
By thy blessing, let these rings be to Charles and Camilla, symbol of unending love and faithfulness.
Together at last, with nothing to hide. The princes were delighted. Harry spoke for both of them when he praised his new stepmother.
No, she's not the wicked stepmother. I'll say that right now. And everyone has to understand that it's very hard for her. I mean, look at the position that she's coming into. She's a wonderful woman, and she's made our father very, very happy, which is the most important thing. William and I love her to bits, get on really well with her. There's a lot of stuff that I read, and there's a lot of stuff that obviously irritates me and my brother and my father most as well, as he is someone who tries to do his best the whole time. but always being continually criticised for all sorts.
Soon the newlyweds, now undertaking royal duties together, would set off on a tour to India, and en route would take a poignant detour to Egypt. The Duchess of Cornwall, as Camilla was now known, was bringing flowers to the war graves of British soldiers who'd fallen at the Battle of El Alamein. They'd been comrades of her soldier father.
Well, I've got a huge lump in my throat. It left me with such a lump, it's quite hard to speak. I find it incredibly moving. But I'm I'm so pleased to have done it for my father.
Charles and Camilla were both moved by visions of old warriors. Soon, however, their concern would be for the young warrior, Prince Harry, fighting undercover in Afghanistan. His proud father would be glad to have him home.
I do so understand now what it's like for so many other families and the loved ones, you know, of those who are serving abroad.
And as the couple reflected on the pain and valor of war, they might well have breathed their thanks for the fate that had brought them together after so many years apart. Soulmates, setting out on a great adventure in the Indian summer of their lives. But now that Charles's mother, the Queen, is in her 80s, one question still hangs in the air. When Charles, the man born to be king, does eventually succeed her, will Camilla be his consort or his queen?
There's a right royal rumpus next tonight on Bio in Disorder in the Court.